Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going through my remix of Tom Evans' Monochrome Bruno Blanc, the Dilby remix, out on Valiant. This record was the #1 selling Deep House track in the hype charts. Number 10 overall, but let's just go with #1. Sounds better, right? So jokes aside, I'm really stoked and thanks very much for the support. I thought the least I could do is open up the project and show you how it's done. If you like the track and you haven't grabbed a copy yet, there's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify if you want to go and support that. Much appreciated. And as a further thank you, I've put together a little sample pack with some of the elements that I used in the remix. There's some loops, some presets, some MIDI, lots of good stuff. You can grab that sample pack from the link in the description, which goes to Patreon. It's one of the best ways that you can support the channel and make sure I keep bringing you these videos every week. Let's get into Ableton and see how I did this thing.
And if it's nice, play it twice.
Alright, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is the project files for the Play It Down remix out on Valiant. So it's the track that you heard in the background of the intro, but here we go, this is what it sounds like.
Like what you know about saving up 3 weeks worth of your paycheck and going to camp at your local record store.
So let's get into this and see how I did it. So first things first, I've got a couple of reference tracks in here. One is Dario D'Artis' remix of All About House Music, and I think what I used this for, this project's about a year old, so I don't remember the exact process like 100%, but I'm pretty sure what I used this for is just to kind of see how he used the vocal in this remix, because it's also got a spoken word vocal. Funnily enough, I actually ended up also remixing All About House Music on Deep House. So there you go. I also used this Piedmont track, Wake Up, as a reference, which I think is much more for like just the vibe. It's a great track. It's older, it's on Toolroom. I've played it in so many sets. It's got like a really cool, fun feel, but also good energy. Not too serious, but not too cheesy or anything. Nice vibe. And then of course it's a remix, so we've got some remix parts. So the first thing I do when I'm approaching a remix is I listen to the parts, try and figure out what I'm going to do, and try to get an idea of what I'm going to do in the remix in general. So what we've got here is this organ. Cool. These synths, which I didn't end up using. Actually a really cool part. Got the bass. Also didn't use that. We've got this vocal choir. Also cool, but didn't use that. And then we've got the main vocal. So this track is all about the vocal really, isn't it?
Like what you know about saving up 3 weeks worth of your paycheck and going to camp at your till you found some trash and a treasure.
Sick vocal from Bruno Blanc. So let's have a look at how this is all put together, right? Start off with the kick. It's literally a 4 on the floor kick, and it's just one that I use a lot. That's it. It's a kick. We've got some claps. Now I've got 2 layers to this main clap part. We've got a very standard clap sound here. And we've got this pre-clap, so it's actually part of a top loop, show in browser. But I'm using the envelope here just to isolate the clap in it. And the reason I chose this is it's like a different texture and sound to the other clap, but it's also got this like pre-clap sound. So it gives it a bit more of an open, live feel, and it helps to kind of give the track a bit more of a kind of groovy, housey vibe. There's kind of like a looseness to this pre-clap kind of sound. Something I use a lot, and especially in these kind of houseier tracks. Then we've got a couple of groove elements. I've got a snare groove and a clap groove. So these are kind of working together. Yeah, they're on 16th notes to add some kind of more swinging groove to the drums. If I grab both of these, you can see how the clap and the snare are interacting with each other. Good stuff there. On the claps, I've processed them with a little bit of clipping, just taking off the very peak of the transients and a bit of reverb. 21.5%. Without the reverb, they just sound a little bit dry. Sounds a bit more kind of spacious and open. Right, so let's get into the hats. We've got this open hat here, which is kind of like the main open hat. So this is coming from a loop, and I've used the envelope tool again to take out some of those extra hats. Show in browser. So I'm kind of keeping this first little tambourine hit and then using the offbeat open hat with the claps and kick. Just creating this really nice, solid backbeat foundation. When I'm starting out, I really want to nail that kick, clap, and hat combo. And if you get the right elements that just work well together, you can kind of create like a foundation that just works. Like those three elements, for me, just really work well together. The way that the lengths of the samples work and the way that the sounds interact with each other, it just kind of adds up to more than the sum of its parts, for me anyway. I'm also using this top loop or the backbeat. So it just really helps to add like a little bit more groove and kind of fill out the drums with a bit more texture. There is this background loop, which is another top loop, but I'm EQing out a bunch of the tops and also using sidechain to duck out where the kick and clap are. This one's actually got a bit of percussion in it, so it's adding a bit more groove. Now to spice things up, I've added a 909 open hat, and the MIDI I'm playing here is this kind of like double, single, double, single. Sounds like this. So it kind of adds another flavor. It's that classic house 909 sound, and the pattern is adding some nice groove and swing to the drums. I've got this tambourine, which is adding, it's quite low in the mix, but it's just helping to elevate the drums again. Adds a little bit more energy, a bit more brightness. I like doing this with it through the track with subtle elements just to kind of keep building things up, and then you can kind of take them all away and create like some real tension and release and some real drama. So kind of doing the same thing, progressing the drums. We've got this ride here. And then we go into the break and I take away both of those high elements, which kind of settles the drums down again. So I'm using those like bright elements in the hats to control the energy and the way that it flows through the track. So here's our drums. Nice, good, solid, housey, groovy drums. I've got this conga. So the pattern by itself sounds a bit random, but I've kind of created this pattern to fit in with this background loop. I play that together with the kick. But what I'm trying to achieve with the different percussion elements is to really bring the groove together. I want all of the elements to be kind of creating call and response and just all working in harmony together. So there's not too many overlapping frequencies, and where there are, things are panned out wide and just tried to create separation. I've got these tribal hits, which are basically like a bunch of fill sounds from different packs. I'm using the volume envelope. Then on the processing, I've got an overdrive, an EQ, this LFO tool, which is only ducking out everything below 350. so you can still hear the main part of the percussion. It's just taking out anything that's overlapping with the low mids of the kick. And then we've got this echo. So the combination of the echo and the overdrive help to give all of these fill elements a bit more of a cohesion and make them feel a bit more related to one another. Now let's have a look at this bass line together with the kick. And with our backbeat. So nice, warm, groovy sound. It's coming from Diva. So the sound is based on the mini poly template here. And we've just got a saw wave, a square, and a saw. But what I'm actually using is only the first saw. And then I'm using MIDI to kind of create a chord for the bass, which helps to give it some texture. If I wasn't playing the chords in the MIDI, which I'll show you in a minute, it would just probably sound like this. Which is cool, but it's a bit nondescript. So let's have a look at the MIDI. So I've got that G2 that I was playing before, but then I'm using a bunch of octaves and sevenths, which is the D, because we're in G minor, to just kind of create a bit more of a chord, a bit more richness, depth, and texture. It also helps to kind of create a bit of groove and separation between some of these sounds. So when I'm playing them with or without the D, it helps to create kind of separation, which gives it a bit more groove. So it's kind of loosely based on a kind of just a really simple offbeat bass line, which is like this, which is really driving, but not so groovy. So to add a bit more groove, I've put these notes on the 16th, and then I'm creating these different chords, which helps to give a bit more of a roll and a bit more separation. One more thing I'm doing is adding a bit of velocity randomization, and that is that each time the notes are played, the velocity is slightly different for each note, and that affects the volume. So each one of those chords sounds slightly different every time it plays. This does inherently cause a problem where some of those bass notes would be louder. So what I do to combat that is add a bit of glue compressor here just to control the dynamics a bit, and then I'm using this limiter to just kind of squash the tops for anything that gets too loud and add a little bit more volume for anything that's too quiet. It's basically like a couple of layers of heavy compression. So pretty simple on the bass, but quite effective. I like it. All right, now let's have a look at these melodic elements. It's really not too complicated. The first thing I've got is this dark stab, also coming from Diva, also based on the mini poly. Preset is in the sample pack if you want to grab that. So this is the MIDI, just a chord here, and it's a G minor chord, and I've just taken the D and put it down an octave, inverted it, so it would otherwise sound like this. Just makes it sound a bit darker. And then I've got this chord device which is duplicating that whole chord up an octave. So in the synth, we're actually only using one oscillator, which is just playing a sawtooth. I've got a bit of chorus on there coming from Diva. And then I've got this decapitator, which is just adding a bit more thickness and a bit more kind of that gritty saturation. Very nice. And this is really like a groove element. It's just kind of happening every 2 bars on this turnaround. So it just kind of emphasizes the end of every 2 bars, which helps you to notice that it's not a 1-bar loop. It's just about extending out the loop, basically. Now, the kind of main synth element I've got is this groove chords element. This is the MIDI pattern. So in the synth, we're playing 3 oscillators, 3 sawtooth. We've got 1 kind of bass layer. We've got 1 note up an octave, which is a bit higher. And then we've got 1 7 semitones up. So that's tuned up an octave and down 5, which makes 7 semitones up. And then that's mixed in a little bit higher. So we're kind of like playing a power chord and reinforcing the bass, essentially. And this is kind of really adding some groove. It's almost like working together with the current bass line. It's a groove element, really. It's not exactly like a melody per se. really helps to add some drive to the track. And I'm using the filter cutoff here to help create tension and release. So you can see there when I open up that cutoff and then snap it back, the bass comes back in from the kick and the bass, and it really kind of pulls the groove back in tight on the drop. It's a really good effect there. Now we've also got this TD3 acid riff. So this is coming from the Behringer TD3. I've just recorded it into audio, and I did grab the audio and quantize it, and then I've added some groove here. MPC 16 swing 57. So I just recorded this through and did a little bit of tweaking, pretty subtle. Just add a wee bit of movement, and I've got quite a bit of processing on here because originally it's a bass element essentially, and I want to make it into more of a mid-range sound, so I'm doing that by adding some saturation with Decapitator. On the tone, I'm emphasizing a bit more of the highs. I've got the drive and punish pushed really hard, so it's adding some pretty heavy saturation. And then here I'm cutting out all the lows and really trying to emphasize these upper mids. I've got some chorus from Tel Chorus LX and some echo LFO tool doing some sidechain, and then another EQ just further taking out any of those subs. So without this and without the decapitator, so the decapitator really helps to add a bit of that buzz, and then this EQ is really emphasizing it. So this element just really kind of is intended to give the track a bit more of an old school throwback kind of flavor, and it really helps to, again, like add another layer of intensity as we're going through the track. It's pretty subtle in the mix, but it's just kind of bubbling away, giving this really cool feeling to the track. I've also got one more element from the TD3. This is just like a pluck with some delay on it, basically. And that's kind of, it's, I don't know, it's almost not necessary, but it just adds a little bit more groove. So it's only used in a couple of small places in the track, just to kind of add a bit more power on the drop. And then the vocal comes in at this point, and I take it out. Now all of the rest of these elements are strings and pads, and what I'm doing with them is trying to add some tension and release, basically adding some kind of drama and some lushness in the breaks. So the elements we've got here is this organ pad from the original, this phase pad. So this is coming from Serum, this is the patch. Basically what's giving it that kind of weird eerie sound is this LFO1, this crazy envelope, which is set to the detune. So that's what gives it this kind of weird, tense movement. I'm just playing a chord with the G and the D below it, and on that one I'm automating the volume and the cutoff. So it really kind of starts very low in the mix and gets quite intense. I've got another pad here. Put more of a lush kind of choir type pad, really cool, helps to add some atmosphere. You'll notice as I go through these, they're all very different textures, so they're kind of adding up, but they have space for each other. I've got this deep pad. So that's a bit more dramatic, almost got a bit more of a brassy kind of sound. So you can hear that we're really getting, it's really getting very full here as we go towards the break, and then we've got a high string just to add some more emphasis. But it's pretty low in the mix. So that is all of the melodic elements. Now the vocals, obviously the main vocal is a very important element in the track. It's kind of like the main element of the track. So with the arrangement and the placement of the vocal, I've tried to do this kind of 16 bar groove section, 16 bar vocal section, 16 bar groove, 16 bar vocal. Here after this break, I went for 8 instead of 16. I guess I had more vocal that I wanted to use. But for the most part, I'm trying to have a bit where we just hear the groove, then introduce the vocal, then we go to a break, then we hear the groove, vocal, break, that kind of cycle. So the processing on this vocal.
Listening through 20, 30.
So I'm cutting out some of the lows, and I've used this little altar boy from Sound Toys, and I'm just bringing down the formant by 1. So what that basically means is it's almost giving it the effect of being pitched down, but without actually altering the pitch or the key of the vocal. Without that,
Listening through 20, 30, 50 records till you found some trash and a treasure.
so it just gives it a bit more of a darkness, and because I'm adding this drive here, it also helps to give it a bit more grittiness. So with this little altar boy, it can create a bit of phasing, which is why I've put this utility here and monoed the signal before it. I just find that for something like a vocal, that's a pretty important step just because of the nature of this plugin. I've got some de-essing and some delay. As I said, I'm adding some drive here, so I'm just making sure that we're not getting too much sibilant S sounds, which can be a bit harsh. I'm also adding this EQ bump here around 2K, which helps to emphasize the vocal and push it forward in the mix. It's not really about how it sounds here. It maybe doesn't even sound good here.
Listening through 20, 30, 50 records till you found...
I don't really think it sounds better by adding this EQ when the vocal's soloed, but I'll show you in context when I'm actually playing it in the track. It really helps it to pop through.
Listening through 20, 30, 50 records till you found some trash and a treasure.
So that's something that can be quite difficult to do. It's very tempting to try to process things and make them sound good in isolation. But it doesn't really matter how they sound in isolation because they're not going to be heard in isolation. It's about how they sound in the track. And as I said, I've kind of made this vocal worse in order to make it better in the track. Also using this EQ as a problem-solving device for the problem that was created when I brought down the formant of the vocal, made it a bit darker. Okay, so we've got this house vocal. What this is I've just taken a little phrase from the original vocal. I've added some filter, some delay, and again the little altar boy, this time tuned down by 2, to add like a new groove element to the track. So it's a nice textural element. So I'm using the auto filter and some delay sends throughout the track to help use that vocal to build tension and release.
Tunes on tunes on tunes on tunes.
And I've got another just one-shot vocal, which also is just kind of like a groove element, doing a call and response with this house. So it's a female vocal, but it's very low, very subtle, very, very quiet in the groove, but it's just adding a bit of texture together with the drums and stuff. It's something that I like to do in pretty much every track, is have some kind of vocal element working together with the drums and the groove. It just helps to kind of humanize things a bit. Yeah, adds like some kind of depth and some interest to the drum beat. I've got this vocal one-shot thing. It's kind of acting as an effect. So I've just got that with a bit of delay on it and some LFO tool, just ducking it to the kick. This Hornet song key just detects the pitch. And then I've taken that, added some reverb, recorded it out, and reversed it to create this reverse vocal effects. So that kind of sucks into this shout. It sounds like this. So there we go, adding kind of tension and release on that drop. In the effects, it's pretty simple for the most part. I've got a big crash with a long delay on it. I've got this reverse crash that's being sent to some delay from my returns, this one here. And then I've got some risers. Quite a full-on one. Another one here, like a noise one, and then this one, which is like a vocal texture. And I've just pitched that to be in the key of the track. It's quite subtle in the mix, but it just helps to add a bit more drama, a bit more tension and release.
My house, our house too.
So with these kind of things, I'm wanting them to be pretty subliminal. You could hear in the mix, you can't really hear this too much, but when I take it away, it does like remove a little bit of that tension. So all of those things like this together with a bunch of these pads and things rising up helps to create this like big dramatic rise, and then they're all gone when the bass comes back. So it creates this release, tension and release. Now to emphasize these drops here, I've got white noise, and then I've just got another instance of that, but it's 5 dB quieter. That's the elements of the track. So on the drum bus, I'm sending everything to this big reverb. So you can hear there, it's almost like a white noise riser, but because it's coming from the actual sound of the drums being sent to a reverb, it feels a bit more kind of organic and natural and part of the track because it's being created by the sounds in the track. On its own, that sounds like this. And the last thing to show you is basically the sample pack that I've created, which is a bunch of the elements from the track. We've got some loops here. We've got some MIDI, we've got some one-shots, and some presets for Diva and Serum. So obviously I can't give you any of the vocals or anything because that's from the original, but there's some cool elements in here that you can get stuck in with and use in your tracks. Alright guys, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for the support on this track. It really means a lot. If you like this video and you're looking for more in this style, then check out this playlist. I think you're going to like it. There's a bunch more walkthroughs of tracks that I've released. Well, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
Like what you know about saving up 3 weeks worth of your paycheck and